Welcome to Story Strategy Live. This is episode 28, believe it or not. And today we're going to be talking about creating conflict and tension. This is part of our Back to Basics series, right, Dawn?
Back to basics.
We're going back to basics. What does that mean?
Good. The music worked. Everything worked.
I was just going to play it off like we're always this professional.
We're always professional.
But yes, that was less embarrassing than last week.
We're good. And we are going back to basics, going back to all the story structure things, all the things you need to get going on your story, and that will take us through the end of this year. So that is our series right now.
And part of the reason that we thought this would be a good time to do this is because we know a lot of people are gearing up for NaNoWriMo. Yes? Are you doing a NaNoWriMo book?
I am not.
Me neither.
It makes me sad because I love NaNoWriMo. I really do. But I'm just not in that place this year. But I know a lot of people who are. And so sending all the good writing vibes to them.
I think because I have other just deadlines, I like every month feels like NaNoWriMo.
Yes, exactly. And Julie is here. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Julie.
So I have a story this week.
Good.
That actually kind of will go into our conflict and tension topic.
Good. Kate is doing Nano.
Oh, good. Hi, Kate. So I'm telling this story with permission because, teenagers, you got to make sure that 10 years from now, they're not upset with you because you told the story on them. So my son is 17 and he has a healthy fear, we shall say, not phobically afraid of, has a healthy fear of flying insects.
Wait, flying and sex?
No, flying insects.
Okay. I'm like, those are two separate fears. Also,
okay,
17, like not appropriate. Come on, Dawn.
Okay, I realize I'm Texan. Okay, I realize the accent comes out.
Flying insects.
Bugs.
Got it.
Flying bugs.
Got it.
Hi, Brooke. Glad you got here just in time for the flying insects. Flying bugs.
I'm just very quiet.
So part of this fear is very legit because there might have been a moment when he was very young where I had a wasp fly into my shirt and I may or may not have completely stripped my shirt off, screaming, yelling, stomped all over it, drowned it as if it was completely soaked it in Raid, and then the wasp still climbed out of the sleeve of the shirt like you were bothering it. So he had that. And then he had a moment when he was a little bit older where I'm sitting in my living room and I hear what sounds like an MMA fight going on down the hall.
Mm-hmm.
You know how it is with kids, after, especially when you've got two of them at that point, you're just kind of like, is anybody screaming?
Yeah.
No, we're good. It's fine. And what had happened, he came out and he had this absolute terrified look on his face. And what had happened was he was, in the bathroom. He had gone to wash his hands. And he thought there was a wasp on the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And so he turned around to flee the room and there was a wasp on the door because he was seeing its reflection.
Okay.
In his mind, he was probably 7 or 8 when this happened. In his mind, that meant there were 2 of them in that room with him. And he almost killed himself trying to get out of the bathroom.
Oh, God. I hate wasps, too. So I do understand.
All that to say, healthy fear of bugs. So he is in an animation class. He goes to a career center. And the first week that they were there in person, a wasp randomly stung a kid in class. Like the kid was sitting there, and our windows at our schools don't open. So it's not like they were sitting there with the windows open.
Yeah.
He was sitting there in class. This thing just buzzed right in, stung him on the hand. And not my son, another child. Stung him on the hand and buzzed off. And so the poor kid was jumped up and yelped. And then they had this whole, what happened? He's like, I think I just got stung by a wasp. Oh, there it is. So earlier this week, my son goes to class and while he's sitting there, the teacher looks above his head and went, oh no. And it's because the wasp was back and was just kind of dive bombing people.
Oh my God.
he's trying to like do his animation and all this, and he's like, and of course he's a 17-year-old. He doesn't want to look like he's scared of anything, but he's like, finally, I stood up and was like, can I work out in the hall? They have what they call a think spot, which is this little like alcove thing down the hall. He's like, can I just go work out there? Because it's just not going to happen in here. It's just not. And so the teacher's like, yeah, and they have a process for you sign out on the computer. You can go down there. So he goes down there and he's working. And as he put it, it was a horror movie moment because he's sitting there he's the only one in this little space. And the campus police officer walks up, does not acknowledge him at all, like walks right by him to a door that he didn't know was there. Mm-hmm. Opens the door, pulls out his high voltage flashlight, swings it around a couple of times inside, shuts the door and turns around and goes and walks off.
That's strange.
And so my son's like, so now I have a choice to make. Do I go back upstairs where the minion of Satan is dive bombing everybody? Or do I sit here and wonder what's hiding in this closet?
Yeah.
And
well, obviously it wasn't in there, whatever he was looking for, the bad guy or.
Right. He's like, so I just kind of sat there for a minute and then he went upstairs. He finally at the end of class went back upstairs and the teacher was like, you missed the great wasp battle.
Oh, they tried to kill it?
They tried to kill it. They have no bug spray. And really in this lab, because you have really expensive computers and really expensive tablets that they use to draw on and all this stuff, you can't just like spray insecticide. And so they tried to kill it with the sanitizer they use.
That's only going to make him mad.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You got to take your shoes off and smash those guys. I have experience.
It thoroughly annoyed Mr. Wasp.
Oh, no.
And so things have not been going well.
That is not good. We used to have in my house in Maryland, like in the summertime, these big black wasps would just appear inside, usually up in our bathroom. And there were times where like, I'm allergic to bees and wasps. I'm not sure about wasps, but I think so. Like if I'm allergic to bees, I'm pretty sure. I've done a little research. I don't know, but I don't want to get stung either way. And especially not in my own house. But there were times where like the wasp would be over on my husband's mirror on the other side of the bathroom. And I'd like wash my face and brush my teeth and stuff. Like be like, as long as it's going to stay there, we'll be okay. And then I would like close the door and go to bed and he would come open the door and I would wake up from a dead sleep and be like, keep the door shut.
Right. Don't let it out. Don't let it out. Yeah. So I did get permission to tell y'all about that because that kind of fits in with what we're talking about.
Well, the story you just told, I was thinking as you were talking about the guy looking in the closet and stuff, you were building a lot of tension.
Yes. Yes. And there was conflict involved. Yeah. Lots of conflict.
Well, and a backstory, like a healthy fear established through experience.
His wound has been established.
Yes. So he had to face the one thing he cannot tolerate. That's right. Making some a great conflict.
Right. And so we're talking about conflict and we're going to just go with that.
We're going to do that now.
We're going to do that now.
Okay. So what is the biggest mistake that people make when they set out to figure out what their conflict is going to be?
The biggest mistake I think people make is confusing conflict and confrontation.
Explain.
A conflict is not an argument.
Right.
And so you notice, and we'll kind of like break down my son's story, but there was no yelling. There was no, when he has to leave the room, the teacher let him leave the room. There was no.
Does a conflict have to be with another person?
No.
No.
No. At this point, for much of my story, his conflict was definitely with that wasp. That was definitely.
Well, and does there even have to be another like external living thing with whom the conflict exists?
No, because we're going to get into that too, of the difference between the external conflict and the internal conflict and what genres play to this one, what genres play to that one.
Yes. Okay. So, well, then if it is not just a disagreement, then what is, if you had to define it?
My definition for conflict is conflict involves an impossible choice.
Oh,
and
yeah.
those
Okay.
and the choices have consequences, and those consequences have stakes. So you start with your conflict, and then you've got choice A or choice B, and we're going to give tons of examples of that. But the thing that makes that a conflict is that either choice has consequences, and either choice has stakes. So the example that I like to use for this is the sleeping baby analogy, which I totally made this up. So it may only make sense to me, but I'm hoping it makes sense to everybody else.
Let's find out.
So talking about the same kid, real life example, talking about the same kid, give you a little backstory. I had 2 children 12 months apart. So I had babies for a long time. And my son had chronic ear infections.
Oh, God.
So he had 9 ear infections from the time he was 3 weeks old until he was 10 months old when he had surgery. Kid did not sleep through the night until he was 4, but that's a whole other story. So take a really tired mama, really, really tired mama. And there was one day I was home with him. He was probably 4 or 5 months old at this point. I was home because he had an ear infection. He was running a fever. We were sitting in the recliner, and I had like the little boppy pillow, the little.
I remember the boppy.
Yeah, pillow. And I was holding him like this. Well, we both fell asleep because it'd been a really hard, 6 months. So we both fell asleep. I wake up. It's 2 hours later. I really need to use the restroom at this point. Been drinking a lot of water while I'm trapped in this chair. It is time to get up. But I have a sleeping baby who has not slept in a week on my lap. So the conflict here is I have a choice.
You can't choose pee the chair.
Is that
the choice you made, Dawn?
That's not the choice I made, but that's the choice that did cross my mind.
You're like, I've got a lot of diapers around.
That's exactly. I'm like, there's blankets. It's fine. I don't like this chair that much anyway. But so you have that choice of, do I wake up the child or do I pee on this chair? I ended up trying to, and this also goes with what your character might do, because there was stakes to both sides of that.
Well, so
peeing on the chair,
stakes. I understand consequences. Like if you pee on the chair is ruined. But what do you mean by stakes?
Well, okay, so the consequences are the child wakes up and I have a crying, cranky baby for the next however many hours.
Yeah.
Or I have a messy chair. So you've got those two. So those are your next consequences. But the stakes move out further than that, because the stakes come to, I have this crying baby who's probably not going to go back to sleep tonight, which means when the sister wakes up, I'm going to have the 2 crying babies because I can't get one of them to sleep and the other one. So it's the domino effect.
Okay.
The stakes on the other side in this case are, I really can't pee the chair because there's humiliation involved there, internal. Explaining that to my husband, although at that point in our lives, he'd have probably been like, okay, whatever. We'll buy a lawn chair. It'll be fine. Because none of us were sleeping.
Stakes are sort of like, what do you have to lose?
Yes.
Or gain, I guess.
Yes, that's exactly. The stakes are, what are you risking?
Okay.
And the consequences are the outcome of your decision.
Okay.
And how that outcome fits what you're risking.
So waking up the baby, you risk being awake for the rest of your life.
Right. Yes.
Peeing in the chair, you risk being taunted.
Yes. Well, and then not having a chair in our living room. Yeah. So what I did in that situation is I tried to wiggle myself out from under the baby so that I could stand up and just pick the baby up, maybe lay him down in a bed, which I knew wasn't going to happen, but I had high hopes. So you can also kind of relate that to how your character does when they're faced with the conflict, is they don't usually be like, I choose A or I choose B. There's the wiggle process in there.
Right. Well, and they might even choose one and then start down that path and realize they can't choose that one. They have to choose the other one for whatever reason.
So I got about halfway out of the chair and the kid woke up.
Of course he did.
Yes. So
All right. So conflict is what stems from having to make some kind of choice or decision
yes.
where maybe both decisions, both options are equally poor for whatever reason. Like you're going to lose
Or
something,
they
or
can
they're
be
both
equally
awesome.
great,
Yeah.
but they have stakes related to them that usually end up like if you're choosing between in a romance, if you're choosing between this great job or staying here with the love of your life, you're still giving up something.
Right.
So you're still gaining or losing something.
Right. Okay. Got it. So an impossible choice.
That's why I call it an impossible choice. And where you can kind of see these in like it usually pops up in blurbs a lot of times as you see the conflict stated in the blurb, or I miss these kind of movie trailers where they started off with the in a world.
There's one guy that does that, I think.
He's awesome though. But it's like the in a world where jelly beans are the only economy one man must choose between, and then it'll set up, his
Right.
jelly bean factory and his family. And so it immediately sets up your conflict. And sometimes it'll give you a hint to the consequences and the stakes past that. It doesn't always, though.
So that's your log line. That's what we were kind of alluding to last week. Yes. Awesome. Well, so if that is the definition of conflict, then an impossible choice that your characters must make, which has consequences and stakes on both sides, then how does tension differ from that?
Tension is built, the conflict feeds the tension. And so, for example, with the story about my son and the wasp, if you know that he's terrified of wasp, and you're that teacher, now the teacher didn't know that going in here, but you're that teacher watching it from the outside, it creates worry for you for that character.
Right.
Same thing with the sleeping baby, of if you've ever had a sleeping baby, or as Julie points out, a cat on your lap or anything you don't want to disturb, the tension comes from which decision is going to be made and what are the consequences of that decision, and how's that going to impact the rest of the story.
Right.
So,
and then it differs a little bit with romance. There can still be plot and conflict tension, but there's usually sexual tension as well, or relationship tension, where you kind of know that these two characters, well, you do know if it's a romance, that these two characters are supposed to get together, but they do the dance, like the push and pull, and that builds the romantic tension until, the good stuff happens.
Until magic.
Right.
Well, and if you're working with like a thriller or suspense, that kind of thing, usually the conflict there, or I'm sorry, the tension there comes from the reader knowing something the character doesn't.
Right.
And so, like in the movie Sleeping with the Enemy, with the Julia Roberts movie, I don't know if
I remember it. Yeah.
Towards the very, very end, bad guy, abusive husband who's been chasing her this whole time is in her house. And there's a moment where the tension's created because everybody knows it. And that's where, to give a quick thing of the movie, her husband was very abusive, very controlling, and everything always had to be lined up just so. And there's a moment early in the movie where she's lining up her bath towels, and then she kind of laughs and like them up and leaves them that way. And the way her husband is in her house is she sees that all the bath towels are lined back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a great moment of tension, because then you are like super worried for that character, because you're like, okay, where is he?
Wow.
And what is he going to do, and how's this going to turn out? Well, another part of the tension is there's a moment where he's behind the door. The guy who she's kind of been getting to know comes and knocks on the door because he's supposed to be coming in, and she's talking to him but won't let him in, and isn't letting him know that there's somebody back behind the door. So the whole time, as the viewer or as the reader, you know something that the character standing on the porch doesn't, and that's that the bad guy's behind the door.
Right.
And so the tension. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add. So, like in a book, that tension that we were, that you feel when you're watching a movie like that is what pulls readers through the story. And in a thriller or a murder mystery, you just can't escape it. You have to have it. So, if you don't know how to build it, then there are some devices that you can look at that are commonly employed, like the ticking clock. There's almost always a ticking clock, right? In a thriller, we must find the nuclear bomb before the timer counts down to 0, or whatever. The cans in the cupboard all had to face forward, James says.
Yes.
That whole movie just like...
Yes. It's an excellent tension movie for you, though. I mean,
I can't watch those types of things, though, like, because it is so uncomfortable for me. Like, and I know, like, it's a movie and it's over there and I'm fine, but I can't handle it. And that, and also like The Office, my kids have been making me watch like the entire Office, start to finish. There are some scenes that are this is a different kind of tension. I guess maybe it's like comedic tension, where what's going on is so awkward and uncomfortable that like you just can't sit like and watch it, because you're like, oh my God.
Yes.
So that's tension too.
Yeah. And again, all of those are fed by the conflict in a romance of the will they or won't they, and the stakes of what are they going to lose when they end up in bed together. Because anytime your characters increase that intimacy, something about them changes, and it's the give and take there. And so you've got the romance is carried more by the sexual tension. Thrillers and mystery obviously are carried more by the, creepy tension.
But in both cases, I think the tension is launched from the inciting incident, which is sort of that opening moment where your character has to decide, yes, I'm going to go on this journey, or no, I'm not. They always say yes, or else we don't have a book. But that whatever that choice is can set the tension in place, and then you can start ramping it up scene by scene.
Right. Well, and the tension can be set because, we're talking about hooking later. The tension can be set for your hook, that of what brings that into the reader into it is the worry that you're creating for the characters.
Right. So, and that's one of the ways that you can build tension or make readers care about the conflict, is by building characters that they care about, so that when something is happening to this character, I'm very worried for him or her. I need to make sure that it all turns out okay.
Yes.
And the other,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say one more thing about like using characterization to build tension. In the example with your son, for instance, we knew that like wasps are a big problem for him. Like he's got a history, and you can build something like that into the background of your character, so that like, this is the one thing that this character cannot tolerate, or, it's always going to be a deal breaker in a relationship if this, and then set that up to happen and watch what happens, but the readers will be like, oh God, no, like that's the one thing, they can't do that. And that's tension.
And that's the great part, because if it had been a spider, I mean, like, he doesn't want one to crawl on him. But if there was a spider up in the corner, it'd have been, oh, there's a spider over there. That's weird. And he would have been able to go on with his life. It was the dive bombing.
It's the mobility, really, of wasps that is a problem.
It is. And so part of what you were saying about the reader has to care about the conflict. And that's very important, because if your conflict, we always say your conflict can't be solved by a conversation.
Right.
If your conflict can be solved by the two characters sitting down and acting like they're adults, then you don't have a conflict. Because the stakes and the consequences aren't life or death. And it doesn't have to be somebody's actually going to die. That's just, if we go back to me with the sleeping kid on my lap, in that moment, sleep was a valuable commodity.
Right.
And so the decision felt very life or death at that moment. And so it doesn't always have to be in a thriller, it can be, but like in a romance, readers don't like it when you kill people off in romances. That's generally not
what who you're killing. It just depends.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
I haven't killed a lot of people, I don't think.
So if the conflict is something like, oh, well, he saw her with this other guy, but the other guy is her cousin who's in town for a job interview, that doesn't work, because adults would say, I saw you with another guy. Oh, my cousin, he's in town for a job interview. And the story's over on page 2. So if the conflict is something that you're like, if they would just sit down and talk about this would be okay. there needs to be a very good reason why they're not talking about it.
Right.
There needs to be a huge, big block of why they're not having that discussion.
Definitely. Okay. Well, so, my example we used the wasp example. My other example was Indiana Jones and snakes. Remember, you just knew at some point there were going to be snakes.
There's going to be snakes. And he's like, why is it always snakes? Because it has to be. Because there's no, if it was bunnies, this wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
You know?
Although bunnies, I don't know, they poop a lot. I know that because we have a lot of them in this neighborhood. Evidently, Denver is just rife with bunny rabbits, and they are everywhere, all over the lawns. And my puppy really likes to chase bunnies, but more than that, he likes to eat bunny poop. Just thought I'd share. Maybe I'll go dark and you can finish up. Evidently, I have nothing of value to add here.
No, bunny poop's worthy.
Sorry.
We'll talk about that.
This is my life.
So that goes into our next point. You totally segue that. Yes. And
okay,
that is conflict usually stems from conflicting goals or desires.
Yes.
So with your puppy,
my goal is to walk. His goal is to stop on every lawn and eat bunny poop.
Right. And so that's going to create conflict because it's a problem.
Tension. It creates tension.
Yes, it creates tension.
All my neighbors know me because I'm the lady walking down the street like, come on, Charlie, come on. No, stop. Come on.
So now where our conflict doesn't work great there is the fact that the consequences and the stakes, I mean, what happens if the dog eats the bunny poop?
Nothing, evidently. It seems like his system was made for it. So
it's just a little snack for him.
Yeah, it's just a tasty little bite-sized.
So if you wanted to create some consequences and stakes from that, of your desire is to take the dog for the walk, his desire is to have a tasty yet disgusting snack, you are on a strict time that if this dog does not finish his walk in the next 15 minutes, you are missing the flight to your sister's wedding. And she's never going to talk to you again because you've already got a strained relationship. And then the dog, if he eats that, the vet said he will get weird doggy disease and spend all weekend throwing up. And your pet sitter has said he will not take him if he's throwing up again.
Yes, that would be stakes.
Right. So you got to build it out.
Okay.
For the record, Nancy doesn't have a sister, I don't think. So there's no family who hates her anywhere.
We could just throw my brother into that and it would work just as well.
So this is where we get to talk about goals. Because your character has to have
really excited about this because we've had this little piece on goals for a long time that we haven't fit in anywhere. So she's like, it finally fits.
We're finally talking about goals, whether y'all want to hear about it or not. We're talking about goals.
No, but goals make sense because if my goal is to achieve one thing and yours is to achieve something that's completely at odds with what my goal is, then the two of us are going to have a conflict.
Right. Which will lead to tension.
Yes.
So we've got the external and the internal goals, which those can get really confusing and really kind of cloudy. Basically, your external goal is something you could check off a box for and you could actually see if it's accomplished. So if we're talking about Charlie and his walk, we could see from the outside, if I'm watching you without knowing anything about how you feel on the inside, I could see if you finished the walk and if you got on the plane.
Right.
So the external goal is something that can be attained or not. It's not abstract. You can see it.
But my internal goal is different.
Yes. And we'll talk about them in just a second.
Okay.
We're going to keep them separate for a second. So you need to know what your character wants to achieve. Like, what did they want when they woke up this morning? What is their goal? What are they trying to get? What do they want to see? And in a romance, generally, or it can be a lot of fun, you pair them with somebody who wants the opposite.
Right.
So I came up with some really silly examples.
Well, and the developer example gets used a lot in that one because it is such a good illustration of two people being directly at odds.
So I came up with the so original example of she's a developer who wants to flatten the town's fairgrounds and make it into a tourist condo area. He's the mayor who has vowed to make this the best fair ever because that's how they're going to save their school. So obviously, what?
They fall in love.
And they fall in love later. First, they're going to have to hate each other for a while.
Well, and another great example of that is, we talked about it before, and I don't like this movie, but You've Got Mail, right? Yeah. Because his business is ruining her business.
Right. Well, and again, this is where you have to build out from that. So if we just have woman who shows up who wants to flatten town square, mayor who wants to save town square, either one of them can walk away at any moment.
Right.
Like the woman can be like, oh, I'm not going to flatten your town square. I'll go 30 miles down the road and flatten theirs. Or the mayor can be like, didn't like town square that much anyway. I'm going to leave it. Do what you want, So that's where you have to have the stakes involved. And so, sorry, it was the fairgrounds, not the town square. So the stakes comes from the reason they want this goal. So if we have the woman who's a developer, maybe she wants the goal because she has to prove that her company, she has sunk every penny into this company. And if this company does not complete this contract, it is done. She's broke, living out of a box.
So that's the reason why you can't just walk away, or why the character can't just walk away.
Yes, because she very much has something to gain or to lose.
Right.
And then the same thing goes for our mayor guy of he can't let her just flatten the fairgrounds and start building tourist condos because he needs to hold this fair so that they can save the school, or the kids will be shipped off to a rival district and they will lose their tax money, and it just dominoes from there, and he will have failed them and won't get reelected. So they both have something to gain or to lose, and that's where your stakes are important.
Got it.
So,
I had notes on one of your examples.
I know. Okay, let me really quickly give the other example, and then we can talk about the one that she.
You don't have to.
No, it's fine. So my other example is if you have something where he's a federal agent and she's a jewel thief. Lots of room for conflict, lots of room for tension, but it needs to go beyond that. He has to catch her because, well, it's his job. All right. But why does he have to catch her? Why can't it be this other agent? Well, if he catches her, he gets this promotion. Okay. Why does he need the promotion? Well, the promotion means that he gets to work from a desk instead of traveling, which means he gets more time with his estranged daughter. Same thing. She needs a reason to be stealing the jewels. So her reason for stealing the jewels is some big bad guy is holding her family hostage and is going to kill them in a horrible, terrible way if she doesn't deliver these jewels. So again, you've got conflict that somebody's going to have to make a choice of, do I steal the jewels or let them kill grandma? And then you've got your stakes set up. And then Nancy doesn't think that my car is going to be expensive enough to cost the car.
Yeah, Dawn's other example, which I thought was funny, because I think I saw a romantic comedy that was almost like this. It's a teenager wants to borrow his parents' car because he has asked out the most beautiful girl in the world, and she has said yes. But he has already told her that he has a car and will pick her up, and she's impressed. And he cannot not do that now, because what will she think? And so he goes to his parents, but they remind him that the last time he borrowed the car, he smashed it into a brick mailbox, and they're still paying off the damages. And then Dawn added, the payments to repair the last damage were cutting into their retirement fund. I was like, what kind of car was this?
It was a very expensive car. And
don't let your son drive your Ferrari.
Yes. So that might be a little similar to the plot of License to Drive, which was an 80s movie with Corey Haim and Corey Feldman, who I might have been madly in love with.
No, yes. You just brought up the Coreys.
I'm sorry.
How old are we? Kind of old.
Old enough to remember the Coreys.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so those are all external. Those are all external goals of the goals to get the car, so he takes out the girl. Stakes are my reputation. Mom and dad's external goal is to still be able to retire before they're 90.
I was thinking, like, even if the car repairs are $20,000, like, is that all they've saved for retirement? I mean, come on, parents. You're working for your 90 anyway.
So that brings us to the next point of your stakes need to be realistic, evidently.
Realistic. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, maybe in 1944, that would have been a good, all right. Or 1980, yes. I guess.
Totally planned that for that example. Stakes need to be realistic. Okay. And then we talked about the opposition doesn't always have to be human.
Right. So examples like Christine, the car, Cujo, the dog. In Castaway, it wasn't Wilson that was the antagonist, though. It was just the situation. Yeah.
It was the situation.
Not I will the volleyball.
Castaway is one of my least favorite movies
Thank
ever.
you.
I despise that movie.
I can't believe
I'm sorry so much. All the love to Tom Hanks. I mean, love him with every inch of my heart. But the ocean, there was so much of the ocean.
There's a lot of ocean in that movie.
Yes, but that's just an example of your conflict. Again, that was still not an internal conflict. That's still an external conflict of I want to get off this island and the ocean is doing everything it can to keep me on this island. So opposing goals, even though the ocean really doesn't have a goal. James
knows the Corys. He says you can't knock the Lost Boys. Were the Corys in the Lost Boys?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Did I not see the Lost Boys? Is that where they're all vampires with Kiefer Sutherland?
And they do not sparkle.
I definitely saw that. I'm gonna have to see it again.
I've seen it multiple times, but yes, no, would not like Lost Boys. Kate says she still has nightmares about Castaway. Yes,
I know. It was really long.
Really long. It went on forever. Okay, so internal conflict.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
All right. So this is something that they need, yeah?
Yes, it's where the character is kind of emotionally incomplete, but they don't
know. Yeah, they don't know what their internal conflict is.
Right.
So it can't be like I'm terribly afraid of wasps then. That's
right. No, that's an external conflict. So the internal conflict is always a little bit harder to like nail down, and there's this happy medium you have to hit between the character being so amazingly self-aware,
right,
that they're thinking, I don't want to get involved in a relationship because that boy that I shared my popsicle with when I was 3 never spoke to me again. Or they're so far from their internal conflict, they have no idea why they don't want to get involved. So you got to hit this happy medium. And it's usually related to the wound or the ghost or there's several different words for it. Basically, it's usually related to whatever screwed up the character at some point before this, basically.
Well, so the wasp totally could work because, like, if I was going to write it, I would have, like, some very emotional event was going on and you got stung by a wasp during this very emotional event. And so you always, like, get thrown into feeling the way you felt when that horrible thing was happening whenever you see a wasp, because something like that, which makes it, I'm afraid of more than just the wasp.
Right. But in that moment, especially at the beginning, your character would just be thinking, I don't like wasps.
Right. Because I am not going to be self-aware enough to recognize that the reason I hate wasps is because they remind me of this horrible thing that happened to me.
Right.
Because, and that would be my wound or whatever.
Right. And so where your external goal is what's moving your plot forward normally, your internal goal is going to be what's going to move your character's arc forward, what's going to change them. One thing we always have to throw out there for the romance writers is your character's internal goal is almost never to fall in love.
Oh, yeah. Unless it's completely overblown, like they are so dedicated to finding themselves love that they can't find love because that's a ridiculous goal. And then it's more of an external thing and they still don't know what their internal conflict is.
Right. Yes. Because usually the falling in love is the last thing they think they need. Usually whatever's related to the wound is, like you were saying, it has to be that worst thing for them. And so usually whatever's related to the wound is what's related to this relationship, which is related to falling in love. And we're not touching that because it hurts.
Right.
So they need to have something more than to fall in love.
And it doesn't have to be something terrible that happened to them. A lot of times you see, oh, well, every boyfriend I've ever had has cheated on me. Therefore, I will not ever be in a relationship again because all men cheat. Or, every time I fall in love, it's not reciprocated. So I'm never falling in love again because it's just too painful. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be like, as a child, my mother told me that all men cheat. Or, I watched my elementary school teacher get broken up with. Like, I went to her wedding and she was left at the altar. So I never want to get married because I saw how horrible that was for her. It can be something that happens to somebody else, or just something.
Awesome. You need to hold on to that one.
I was like, but why would you be invited to your elementary school teacher's wedding? Really?
When I got married, I was teaching middle school and I invited my students.
You did?
Because
that
of the community
must have been so cool for them.
The community I was in, like, my students knew, like, some of them knew my husband. And so, yeah, I had a few. I didn't invite all of my classes, but I did have students at my wedding.
That's cool.
So, and they're now all grown up and have their own kids, and that's just terrifying. But
I know. Well, my point really is just that dig a little deeper for that internal conflict and for the wound that you're looking for. And, although we often use the same ones, there are ways of making them fresh. So just try to twist it a bit.
Well, and they can kind of combine, which is where I put the movie Lucky Number 11 on here.
I don't know that one.
Oh, you need to see that one. It's not kid friendly.
Okay.
And I'm about to spoil it for you. So
great.
Yeah,
no, I don't need to see it. Check it off the list.
But so if you're not familiar with Lucky Number 11, it is about it's a mystery kind of thing that kind of twist. I'm totally going to spoil it, so if you don't want it spoiled, skip ahead. But this boy, it starts off he's at the track with his dad, like at a racetrack, and his dad has asked him to stay in the car. And then this other guy comes up and he ends up leaving with the boy ends up leaving with Bruce Willis, actually. And then fast forward, this boy's all grown up, and you figure out through the course of the movie, he's probably killing people. That's probably what's happening. Yes.
Oh,
he has a really good reason. He does. He has a great reason. But
he's now a good reason to kill people. What?
He's an adult now.
Okay.
And he's at this apartment. You're not really sure why he's at the apartment. You know that he doesn't belong at the apartment. And Lucy Liu shows up. And him and her end up having a conversation. And then over the course of him staying at this apartment, which is across from hers, he ends up falling in love with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Bruce Willis shows up back up and says, your girl saw me. She took my picture. She goes down. So now he has this internal conflict because you find out what happened at the track is his dad owed a guy a lot of money. And so that guy decided to make an example out of his family. So he killed his mom. While they were at the track, his dad was murdered. They killed his mom. They killed everybody but him. And so he's been going around getting revenge on that, basically.
Bruce Willis is this guy or the little kid?
The guy who was the little kid. Okay. Bruce Willis is the one who basically trained him to be the assassin.
Why? How did Bruce Willis? I'm just going to have to see the movie. I have a lot of questions.
You have to. It's very. I'm giving the lowest level analysis of it possible.
All right.
But the
what's your point, Dawn?
The point is, and I do have one, is that the kid who is now grown up, he has to make a decision because if he doesn't kill this girl, Bruce Willis is going to kill her and him.
Okay.
So he has suddenly his emotional wound of, I'm never supposed to get involved with anybody. My only goal in my entire life has been to avenge my family being killed, is now I can have a future. Except for this guy's probably going to kill both of us.
Okay.
So,
now I sort of feel like I do want to see it.
yeah, it's good. It's very, very good.
Well, I feel like the other thing that we wanted to say was that any enemies to lovers story is sort of an automatic, like, conflict building, kind of tension filled, because anytime like someone believes they hate another person, obviously there's some kind of, if they're going to get together, there's a misbelief at work there that can get unraveled. So I think anytime you're building one of those stories, it's almost done for you, depending on why they hate each other.
Right. And usually there's also the I don't love this trope. It comes up a lot. Well, I'm not good enough for them. They deserve somebody better. So you have the conflict there of whatever they've been told their whole life has built them up to believe that they're never going to be good enough for anybody. And then you've got the other person who may or may not be trying to convince them that they're good enough, but that's where your inner conflict are going against each other.
Right. That makes sense. All right. We are actually at 45 minutes already.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So our point is conflict means they have to make a choice. And the choice has to have consequences and stakes, and the stakes and consequences and conflict all build tension.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
That's it.
If you have questions, please feel free to email us, text us, message us, however you can get in touch. We will answer. And we're going to go on with Back to Basics over the next few weeks. So we have...
Well, I'm going to pop in for just a second.
Pop in, please.
With conflict, that is what I'm hoping my next teachable class is going to be like. I'm hoping to launch that in January. So we'll see. So if you're confused about that, hopefully I will be able to lay it up much smoother than I laid out my example a minute ago. But hopefully the class... Are you
going to talk about lucky number 11 in that class?
Probably not. It's too confusing if you haven't seen it. No,
that's like trying to explain Memento to somebody.
Oh, now that would be a good one too. That one's got a lot of internal conflict, but we're not.
Oh, Lord.
Okay. Anyway, you were saying we are going on next week.
I was gonna, just tease. We're gonna talk about scene structure. So, what do scenes need? What is a scene versus a chapter? And then Dawn has a note here that says Halloween theme. I don't know what that means.
Well, that was a question for you of, do we want to do a Halloween theme?
Well, what do you mean? Do we have to wear costumes or something?
Well, I was thinking like maybe like a headband or something. But
all right, we will discuss this later.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then November 5th is the one I just can't wait for. We're going to talk about hooking.
And that's going to be fun. That's why we're not mixing the Halloween theme and the hooking. That's why we're doing the scene structure first.
Okay.
We don't want to create any confusion there.
Yeah. Although it'd be easier to know what to dress up as. November 12th, we're going to discuss inciting incidents. And I could call that exciting incidents because I think inciting incidents have to be exciting. I don't know what I'm even saying at this point. So that's enough, I think, for now. So scene structure next week. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, guys.
And if you have questions about scene structure that you want us specifically to address, please send those to us so that we know we're hitting what y'all need.
Yep. All right. There's good stuff coming. I'm in an energetic mood to do some more good Evident Ink stuff. So look out for new exciting things happening, especially next year. All right. We will talk to you guys soon. Feel free to hit us with questions. And as always, rates and all that stuff for editing are on the website if you need editing help or coaching. All right. Hasta la vista.
Bye.